All right, it's time to talk about a band that's fresh on the scene, brand new debut album. How are they going to hit the ground? How are they going to do it? Well, let's find out. Delusion from Enoch Root, and I believe that's how you pronounce it. I want to say it's Enoch Root. Anyway, Enoch Root is a New York-based alternative progressive rock band created by multi-instrumentalist and songwriter Reese Ottenberg. And the Bandcamp says that he takes influences from other bands like Deer Hunter, Haken, and Porcupine Tree. And to say influences would be putting it mildly. This guy blatantly rips off Deer Hunter and Haken a number of times. Now, I want to preface this with acknowledging that this is a trend that I've noticed this year, more so than almost any other year. Like, I know that progressive rock inherently has this wearing the influences on their sleeves, going back into the 70s and excavating whatever the trailblazers have left behind. So I get it. But like, at least most of those bands do something new with it. They make it their own. They play with it a little bit. I'm noticing bands aren't doing that today. I'm finding a lot of bands this year have taken that and haven't changed it at all, and it's very apparent on this record. It's very apparent. There's a number of times on this record where I'm like, yeah, this is just the Deer Hunter. I should be listening to Casey Crescenzo right now because this is just his music. This is just his music prepackaged into something a little bit different. And oh boy. Same with Haken. There's a number of points where I'm like, this is Ross Jennings' vocal styles, like to a T. Now, that is really saying something for Reese in terms of like really utilizing and capturing that sound, that sine waves. But like, I'm listening to this, I'm like, this is stuff that I heard from Aquarius 10 years ago. Oh boy. Now, I wanted to get that out of the way first because I gotta admit, those first three tracks, The Scavenger, Top of the World, and Where It All Went Wrong, those are the three of the best songs that I've heard all year. I'm not even exaggerating. Those three tracks are some of the best music that I've heard this year. And it really frustrates me because I want to like really praise this album on high. I want to like grab people on the street and say, you have to listen to this new band of Epoch Root because it's just so good. This music is so friggin' good. But I'm hesitant to do that because I'm like, but it's also some of the best music that I've heard captured with Casey and the Deer Hunter or Ross Jennings and Richard Hensel from Haken. Yeah, it's like, oh boy. Now, again, I want to at least dive in a little bit more in terms of the actual music. I already mentioned The Scavenger, and it opens up brilliantly. And part of the thing that I love is how Reese is able to construct and layer this. I mean, he's taking all the pages right out of the Deer Hunter playbook and inserting it here. So the orchestration, the compositions, the musical motifs on here are outstanding. Like it's the music, like the thematic aspects of it and the lyrics on here leave a little bit to the imagination. It's kind of reminding me of Native Construct's A Quiet World, and I'm not a big fan of the lyrical content and the messaging behind that record. Kind of feeling the same thing here as well. It's kind of dipping its toe into like the emo side of things, and if that's your bag, then all the power to you. But it's not necessarily my favorite thing, but it's the music that keeps me coming back. I love the layering of the different instruments on here. I love the small moments within the guitar work on here specifically that helps really bring forth and bring about some of the smaller moments on this. That's what I really love about The Scavenger, like the opening track. Then I love the 1-2 punch of On the Top of the World and Where It All Went Wrong. Those two tracks, again, are my two favorite tracks off of this album, and it's what I love. And I love how they bleed right into one another so that Where It All Went Wrong hits with such an emotional high. Like the emotion that Reese is capturing, not only within the musical stylings, but also within his vocal works, is just soaring. It's just so beautiful. But it's basically just lifted off of Act 4 and 5 from the Deer Hunter. And that's really felt within the rest of the album. And that's kind of where this album falls a little bit flat for me. It is 10 songs over about 46 minutes worth of music. And basically from where it all went wrong, we get into single title tracks. Duplicity, Delusion, Domino, Sanctuary, Gray, Response, and Forward. They're all fine, but I couldn't get over the fact that what I was listening to was basically just a ripoff Deer Hunter. And I mean, that being said, it still has some really interesting moments on there. Like Duplicity has some insane guitar licks on here that I'm still kind of scratching my head over. It's got this massive riff, this massive shredding moment. Reese's style of singing on here, he's got this commanding voice on here. It's very intense and very emotive in that sense. But Delusion and Domino I feel like they're almost just treading water. They don't really add anything to the album itself. It just feels like generic Deer Hunter tracks that I'm not all that excited for. Sanctuary starts off almost immediately like a Deer Hunter track that I was almost shocked that it wasn't. I thought that it could have been a cover from them. And it doesn't really add too much. It's just kind of circling around the same kind of thing. And it's kind of reminding me of some of the longer stretches of music that we got from even like Coheed and Cambria, where I'm like, okay, I get it. Are we going to move on? Are we going to cover some new ground? It really isn't until we get to the longest track on this album of Gray that it starts to pick up again. And I think the reason why I like this track so much is because it's not trying to be the next Deer Hunter track. It's not trying to emulate the sounds from Haken or Porcupine Tree. It's its own thing, It's got this really brilliant ebb and flow. It has a really great crescendo by the end of the track. The track takes its time to really build up into this really interesting payoff by the end. And it reminds me of, I mentioned this in a round table that I had earlier last week where a bunch of us were talking about this trend that we're seeing with a lot of these bands basically ripping off other bands. And it's like when you're in high school and a friend of yours is trying to fit in, and in order to fit in, they try to take on a persona of somebody else, and it's just like, no, man, like I like you for who you are. And when you're trying to be somebody else, it's immediately apparent. It's immediately recognizable, and we can see exactly what you're doing. And nobody wants to be friends with somebody that is trying to be somebody else. You don't need to be Susan. You don't need to be Susanna. You don't need to be Lucas or Mark or John or whatever. You just need to be yourself. And I feel like that's the take-home message for a lot of these bands is when you are doing yourself, when you are playing what it is that makes you special, that's when I'm most engaged. And Gray is the only time on this record that I really feel that. And it's one of the reasons why it's probably the only song that I want to return to in the latter half of this record. Because Repose and Forward are, again, just kind of serviceable closing tracks on here. They don't really add anything to the mix. And I'm just kind of done by that point. So yeah, this album was frustrating. This album was very frustrating because on the one hand, it provided some of the best music that I've heard all year. The first 3 tracks, as I mentioned, absolute bangers. Some of the best music that I've heard. Gray, another great track. The rest of the tracks just feel like carbon copy Deer Hunter, Haken, Porcupine Tree, like stuff. And if I want to listen to that, I'll listen to that. Like, I'll listen to the original bands. I don't want to listen to somebody else that's doing a okay homage to it. So, yeah, in that sense, what I will say is Disillusion from Epoch Root is one I would ultimately stream. It's the same thing I was talking about a couple reviews ago with Tri-Top, where, like, the music itself is good. Like, there's no denying that. The musicianship, the artistry, the actual talent behind it is superb. But I don't know if I could actually recommend this because of how blatant it sounds like the influences. What I will at least say is that if you are into the Deer Hunter, if you're into that more modern style of prog, I would give it a spin. As I mentioned, those first 3 tracks, some of the best music that I've heard all year. But if you're like me and that kind of stuff really grates on you, I would honestly skip it. I really, really hope that Epoch Root learns from this, finds their own feet, and does something original, because that's what I'm excited for. The talent is there. The opportunity is there. Let's see if they can grow past that and create something really exciting and different. So yeah, that's what I've got for Delusion from Epoch Root. What did you guys think about this record? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, please let me know by commenting down below. And yeah, that's all I've got. So thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.